The Sega Tower of Power is an iconic symbol of the 16-bits era obsession with add-ons. Sega in particular was a huge proponent of this approach, constantly expanding the Genesis capabilities with peripherals to extend its lifespan throughout the video game's fourth generation. In contrast, Sega's main rival at the time, Nintendo, took a different path. They largely avoided the add-on trend, opting to instead rely on the merits of their games rather than the latest flashy tech. But did you know there was a third player in this era? The TurboGrafx-16, known as the PC Engine in Japan. While it wasn't as prominent in the US, in Japan it shared Sega's love for add-ons, building its own Tower of Power. In fact, the PC Engine was ahead of the curve in some respects. So today, we're going to take a deep dive into the PC Engine's Tower of Power, a fascinating and arguably more impressive setup than its domestic counterpart. So let's dive in and take a look. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Tito and welcome to Macho Nacho Productions. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Tower of Power. And no, it's not the one you know and love from Sega, but rather one you're probably not too familiar with. Let's start with a brief history lesson. A few years into its lifespan, Sega aimed to keep the Genesis relevant and appease investors by extending the console's capabilities. With CD technology surging in popularity in the early 90s, the company seized the opportunity to ride that wave and use it to enhance the console's appeal. And so, in December of 1991, Sega launched the Model 1 Sega CD add-on 3 years after the console's release, expanding on its capabilities. However, as the mid-90s approached, concerns grew over the impending wave of next-generation 32-bit consoles, with Sega's own 32-bit system not yet ready for release and competitors already rolling out their next-generation hardware. The company needed a stopgap solution. And in late 1994, it came, in the form of the eventual failure, the 32X. And so, the legend of the Sega Tower of Power was born. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we had Nintendo, which really didn't have much in the way of add-ons. There was the Satellaview for the Famicom, which was a Japanese exclusive, and of course, the now legendary Nintendo PlayStation. Not really an add-on, but a Famicom with built-in CD capabilities that of course never saw the light of day. So in that respect, Nintendo really didn't have its own Tower of Power, relying solely on the quality of their games and not technological gimmicks to maintain dominance. But then there's the third wheel of this story, from the folks over at Nippon Electric Company, or NEC. In collaboration with Hudson Soft, they released the PC Engine, also known as the TurboGrafx-16 in other markets like North America. The PC Engine was released in 1987 in Japan, about a year before the Genesis, and 3 years before the Super Nintendo. And while it was a commercial success in Japan, the same couldn't be said for its reception in North America. In its home market, however, it flourished, spawning numerous variations, and yes, you guessed it, add-ons. But let's start at the beginning, the PC Engine itself. We're going to focus on the Japanese market since that's where all the interesting add-ons and console variations were released. And it wasn't too long after its release that NEC launched the CD-ROM add-on, just about a year later. This particular model I have here is the first revision, and it came out in December of 1988, beating Sega to the punch by a little over 3 years before they launched their very own CD add-on, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. This made the PC Engine the very first video game console ever to feature CD-ROM based games by a long shot. Now, you couldn't just buy the CD-ROM drive by itself, as there was no way to attach it physically to the PC Engine on its own. You also needed the interface unit, which was used to conjoin the two. These two parts were sold individually at first, but eventually they were bundled together, which honestly just makes way more sense. Not sure why they thought of selling them separately in the first place. Regardless, the CD-ROM drive and interface unit provided PC Engine fans with an enhanced gaming experience through better CD-based audio, which included voice acting. Connecting the PC Engine to the CD-ROM attachment was easy. They each simply slid onto the interface unit, which not only provided composite video output, which was an upgrade over the console's RF-only video output, but it also powered both units through a single power cord. No need for two wall warts like the Sega CD, which required its own power supply in addition to the Genesis. Now, in order to get CD games to work, you also needed this, a special hue card called a Super System card. You would insert this into the PC Engine in order to be able to run the CD-ROM drive. Without this special card, you essentially had a large paperweight. And as an added bonus, the interface unit closed up like a mini suitcase, allowing you to take your PC Engine and CD add-on on the go, which is pretty convenient. Now, of course, later revisions of the PC Engine had their own CD-ROM drive built in, and Sega also had their very own all-in-one unit as well. But this video is about the add-ons and not these later revisions. The PC Engine CD-ROM add-on delivered some pretty incredible titles such as Castlevania Rondo of Blood, among many others, most of which never made it outside of Japan. Now let's introduce the next part of the PC Engine Tower of Power, the ROM amp, with product code AMP30. This thing comes in a box larger than that of a PS3, and I thought that was huge. Anyway, inside is the amp itself, which is exactly that, an audio amplifier much like that you would find in a classic stereo setup of the time, but in a tidier package designed specifically for the PC Engine. Also included are two speakers. They're about 6 inches by 6 inches and according to the manual are rated at about 15 watts of power, which is suitable for a small room. Additionally, we have some audio cables, as well as these two plastic brackets. We'll be coming back to these in a moment. Now, taking a look at the amp itself, around front we have the power button and headphone jack on the left, with two mic inputs on the right. According to the manual, it seems that this can also be used as a sort of karaoke machine. And can we just take a minute to admire all the artwork in this manual? I just love all the cartoonish drawings in here, it's just really adorable. Anyway, we also have a few dials in front, a balance for the left and right audio channels, an overall volume knob, and this one here for bass boost. And the other two dials are for the microphone controls, adding some echo effects as well as the overall microphone volume. Now, taking a look around back, we have the two audio input RCA connectors as well as microphone and line out. Next to that is the speaker connectors, and on the other end we have the power cable along with 3 power outlets for powering other peripherals, which will come in handy once we start to assemble our Tower of Power. Which brings me to the next section of this video, which is putting it all together. But before we get into that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. If you have an idea for a new mod or want to assemble an open source project, PCBWay provides you with the tools to make them a reality. From 3D printing services in an array of materials, all the way to other services like CNC machining, injection molding, and of course PCB and flex ribbon fabrication. So when it comes to taking your retro mods to the next level, PCBWay is the place to make that happen. Check out the link in the description for PCBWay to get $5 off your first order, and again a huge thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. Alright, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and put this thing together, starting by connecting the PC Engine to the CD-ROM using the interface unit. To prepare the amp, we simply need to install the included stands for the interface unit to sit on. These stands ensure proper ventilation by preventing the interface unit from resting directly over the vents. Then we can set the interface unit on top of the amp and start to connect everything together. First, we need to connect the left and right audio outputs from the IFU to the inputs on the amp. I got these really short RCA cables to keep the whole setup nice and tidy and not have long wires just hanging all over the place. Next, we need to then connect the IFU to power directly on the amp itself, and composite video to the television. But we're actually not going to do that. We're going to sort of spice things up a bit, and instead of connecting to an external display, we're going to use this little special PC Engine revision. This is the PC Engine LT, released in 1991, and it's an absolute marvel. It has a built-in, absolutely stunning LCD display, especially for its time, and a TV tuner, so you could even watch television on this thing. At least you could back in the analog days. So we'll take out the regular PC Engine and swap in the LT. Man, this is looking pretty cool. I actually did a video refurbishing one of these lovely machines a little while back, so if you want to check that out, I'll have it linked down below in the video description so you can learn a little bit more about this fantastic unit. Anyway, since we're going to be using this large 4-inch display on the LT, we don't need to hook up the composite video cable, making the whole setup stand alone and a bit simpler. However, since the LT does draw a bit more power because of that beautiful display, it needs its very own power supply in addition to the IFU, both of which would be plugged into the amp. Now, if we do this, it's going to start to become a real rat's nest of wires, which honestly I am not a huge fan of. And it's not the 90s anymore. Here in 2025, we now have a solution for this. For a while, I've been using cables made by Retro Game Cave. I got my start with their Trio line of power supplies way back in the day, making connecting things like the Sega Tower of Power an absolute breeze. One PSU connected to all 3 devices instead of 3 individual ones. So this PC Engine setup being quite unique, I actually reached out to Chuck from Retro Game Cave and asked if he could make a custom power supply that connects the LT to the IFU with a short length of cable, since it's eventually being connected to the amp, which isn't that long of a distance away. And he came through with this perfectly crafted power supply connecting the LT to the IFU and then to the amp's rear power socket. This is probably the cleanest setup you can achieve. And the amp even has this Velcro strap to prevent the power supply from accidentally being unplugged. How thoughtful is that? Anyway, all that's left to do is to hook up the rear speakers. And there you have it, folks. The PC Engine Tower of Power, the lesser known tower of the 16-bit generation. So you may be asking, what can it do? Well, obviously it can play PC Engine titles using the enhanced audio through the amp, and of course, play CD-ROM games. And if I were filming this prior to 2009, we could even watch broadcast television. And of course, we can also play our music CDs, which probably has you wondering, how does it sound? And well, take a listen for yourself. Yeah, it's not that great. I'm not actually sure what's causing the excessive hum. I opened up the unit to check out the electrical components, and this particular example is very clean. The caps all look good, and everything appears to be appropriately grounded. So I may do a recap on this unit just to see if that fixes anything, but if you have any experience with the AMP 30 and know what may be causing that hum, let me know down below in the comments. Obviously, as a direct comparison to the Sega, these two towers of power are quite a bit different. The Sega boasts powerful 32-bit gaming prowess with its 32X add-on, while the PC Engine just gives us a unique, all-in-one entertainment setup. I mean, imagine having either one of these in your bedroom as a kid. How awesome would that have been? Anyway guys, there you have it. The PC Engine Tower of Power. An absolutely opulent setup that is proof that late 80s, early 90s Japan was really living in the future. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I really think you'll like this one here, so check it out. And as always, thank you all so much for tuning in today, and I'll catch you again next time.